Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to be talking about the Path of Exile League that's coming up, Necropolis, and what I'm really excited for, and why I think this is going to be the best league that they've ever come out with. So, starting off, I wanted to talk about the lantern mechanic that they have coming to the game. I think it's really interesting that between every single area, I have to stop for a second and read all of the modifiers and mix and match them and really spend a lot of time before going into any area in the game, including the campaign. I think it's really important because the campaign did feel a little fast. I think it's important that we're slowed down a lot so that the game feels longer and the game feels a little slower because, like I said, I think the game was a little too fast before. I don't think we really felt the impact of our time being used effectively. I think we needed to be using more time in the campaign and to make it feel just a little bit more time consuming to get through the campaign, to get to the end game. And then once we've earned our way to maps by going through the campaign with this lantern, we then get to face the lantern again at maps. Every time we want to put a map in or enter a new area, we have to again interact with this lantern. And I think that's really cool because, like I said, I think farming and blasting maps was too fast. And so this is a great way to slow us down. I think it's important that we're being slowed down and that our time is being spent less effectively. It makes for a better overall experience, in my opinion. The next thing I wanted to bring up was the crafting in this new league. Something that's really interesting about this crafting mechanic is that I get to watch like 9 or 10 second animations that are so cool that I really like. I don't think I would enjoy the mechanic or the crafting as much if I didn't have to wait like 10 seconds before I made an item. Especially as a crafter, it's important that after my 100th pair of boots that I've crafted or my 100th pair of gloves that I've crafted using this mechanic, that I get to keep watching that animation because without that animation, honestly, it wouldn't feel as good to craft the items. It adds that flair that's missing in crafting. I feel like without that flair, honestly, nobody would use this mechanic. And also, I really like the aspect that it is basically like fossil crafting, but with extra steps. And also, I really like the fact that I have to go into my maps and grind for many hours finding these monsters, which I then also get to watch another really cool animation when they get wheeled away into the graveyard so that I can then go to the graveyard area later on and spend more time interacting in there. And the best part about this all is that because there's exclusive modifiers, you're basically, as a crafter, forced to use this mechanic. And I think that it's really important that they're forcing us to use these mechanics, because if they weren't forcing us, it would feel like a lot worse. I feel like I wouldn't be driven to use it as much. So I'm really glad that they're basically forcing crafters, if they want these exclusive mods, to have to use this crafting mechanic in particular. Another thing about the crafting mechanic that I really enjoy is that it's random bases and random modifiers, meaning that no matter what, the outcome's going to be really difficult to get exactly what you want. It's extremely undeterministic, and I feel like if it was too deterministic, it would be too easy and would take kind of the spirit or the RNG spirit of the crafting mechanic out of the game. And I think it's important that we have as much chaos as possible in this game. So I'm really looking forward to the fact that it is very random and that the items are going to look really bad when they first come out, because that means I have to put a lot of work and effort after crafting through this mechanic, and that means I get to spend more time playing the game and crafting in particular. Another thing about the league mechanic that I wanted to talk about was the reward system. I think the reward system, particularly things like getting increased experience and dropping things like lesser shrines, are going to be really important in mapping. I think without those shrines, I don't know if I'd be able to complete like a tier 16 map. So I'm really looking forward to the fact that my rewards are going to be things like shrines and experience points that are going to progress me further, especially in a softcore trade league. Those are really important to me. And I think that most of the player base is going to see that these shrines and increased experience is actually like one of the major things to be target farming this league. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the removal of the Uber keystones and the introduction to the T17 maps. This is really fascinating because the maps are going to be really challenging, that even most builds, especially like solo self-found builds, are not even going to be able to complete these. I'm really excited for when I spend hours and hours farming for a tier 17 map to finally drop, and then I realize I can't actually do it. It's going to feel really impactful. Like, it's going to make me question things like, did I select the right build? Am I using my time wisely? Things like that. And I think that it's really important that the game's making me think about these things. And for that reason, I'm really excited about the fact that like things like rare and unique enemies are going to be able to remove 10% of my life mana and energy shield on hit, basically like forcing me to build leech and stuff. I think it's important to have these aspects of the game. It's going to make me want to build something different. It's going to make me want to build a ranged character, most likely, so that I get hit less often. And then they tied it with the fact that it's gated Uber content, meaning I basically have to do these maps if I want to get my Uber content. And that's really important because before I felt like it was too easy to access Uber content, especially in solo self-found, where after about 2 months of gameplay in solo self-found, your character just barely feels good enough to complete an Uber. I'm really excited for the fact that I also need to be able to complete one of these really hard maps so that I can unlock a fragment, and the fact that I need to do 5 of these to get 5 fragments so that I can unlock an Uber fight. I think that's really important, to make me feel, I guess, the weight of what it means to fight an Uber in this game. I like how they're making it so that not every player can get to Uber fights, and that in particular in softcore trade, it's going to make these maps really expensive, which is going to make them worth farming. And I'm just really looking forward to those aspects mainly. Now, something I'm not particularly keen on, something that I'm not sure the player base is going to actually appreciate, and I hate to be a negative Nancy, but I think the quality of life changes were unnecessary, and I don't think they should have implemented the quality of life changes. I think it's going to speed up the game a little bit too much, especially in softcore trade, where you're going to be able to have like an easier time trading with players. I think it's going to lead to a little more conflict between players, and I think it's going to lead to too much efficiency. So I'm not a huge fan of that, especially things like the veiled orb and automating ashlings. I really enjoyed the aspect of having to interact with players and wait in basically like a 10-minute line to get an ashling service in softcore trade. I'm not a huge fan that they took that away. And I feel like I'm speaking for most players when I say this, that the introduction to automation in trading and just making things way easier in trading and having things like saved atlas trees and stuff is going to make me feel like my time is being valued. And I feel like that goes against what GGG is all about. So I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that. The quality of life changes aren't feeling very, very good to me, especially the harvest bench crafting quality of life change. I think the fact that I now don't have to hover over the item every time, I feel like I'm going to mess up and misclick a craft, and now I'm not going to like have that moment of time where I have to check the item and keep mousing over the item every time I want to craft on it to read the modifiers. I think because of that, I'm going to end up messing up more often. And so for those reasons, I think like this is honestly a terrible change. But again, like they can't all be winners, right? Something I'm really excited for is that they released some new transfigured skill gems for artillery, ballista, elemental hit, ice shot, incinerate, kinetic blast, poisonous concoction, holy relic, and tornado. They've at this point basically covered all of the skill gems in the game. And they're all these transfigured gems are really interesting and different. None of them really cover the old enchantments that we had on the helmets. They're all really new and diverse and interesting in their own right. And I'm really just excited that they're finally have covered just about every skill in the game. Pretty much every skill I can think of has a transfigure gem. Honestly, I don't even know if there are any skills left without transfigurations. So I'm really glad that they're doing this. And the transfigure gems, removing power level from 99% of character builds, I think is really important because, again, I think things were just a little too strong and we were having too much fun with our builds, and I think it's not good to have that. I think we're supposed to feel worse when we're playing our builds. It's important that we're not having too much fun, you know? If we're having too much fun, then that's going to drive us away from playing the game, I feel like. I'm also really excited that they removed cast on left click because I think for newer players who didn't know about cast on left click, it's kind of a disadvantage for them, right? To not know about it. So removing that kind of removes that out of the equation. We don't have to worry about like newer players not knowing that cast on left click is a thing, and that cast on left click, honestly, it was just giving us too much automation. It was making builds feel too comfortable, too intuitive, and I don't think that that's okay. I think players are supposed to feel like they have to push like 6 or 7 buttons on a character to kill one pack of enemies. I think it's really important that we're doing that. So especially like a pack of white mobs, it's important that a pack of white mobs feels like a battle, like an Uber battle every time I'm fighting them. So I'm really glad that they're adding more buttons to the game and making me have to push more buttons, which leads me to my next thing, which is talking about the nerfs to flasks. The nerfs to flasks are basically a direct nerf to Mage Blood. Now, I think Mage Blood was too good of an item, and I think nobody really wanted to use the Mage Blood anyways. I think people were kind of over Mage Blood, you know? So we were trying to like phase Mage Blood out of the game. So a good way to do that was by nerfing all of these flask effects so that we have to push flask buttons more often or even carry around a mana flask now. I think it's important that our endgame builds are all using life and mana flasks. I think it was too easy for the game to just be using utility flasks. Obviously, like character self-sustain is not fun. I think we should have had an extra couple of buttons like hitting the oh no button and having to like push the 2 or 3 key on my keyboard every time I need to heal or every time I need to gain mana. I think it's really important that I'm pushing more buttons and that I'm feeling like having to burn more energy just to get through a map, especially like things like a white map early league. I think it's important that I'm feeling like my back is against the wall and that like I could die at any second. Even in my hideout, dude, sometimes standing in my hideout, I feel like my character is just going to fall over these days, which is like exactly where they need to be in this game. I'm really glad that they removed that which was taken from the game. I think that they were going to be a little too strong anyways. So removing that which was taken, not putting it in the global drop pool or giving it to a boss for their drop, I think that was really important. The gem just gave too much power level, and I think they've learned from their mistake that we can't have that something that interesting or that build enabling in the game. I think it was too good for the game, and it made us feel too powerful. So I'm glad they removed that and giving like things like builds that have to meet projectile requirements, no way to reach their projectile requirements anymore. I think that's really important. Like Forbidden Right without the projectile charms is going to have a really hard time getting to five projectiles, which I think is important because the build felt too strong anyways. So with the removal of charms and the removal of these extra projectiles, I think it's really important that Forbidden Right is going to be basically stuck at 4 projectiles now and is going to have a really hard time finding that 5th projectile. And that's just one of many builds. That's just one example. GGG decided to add small improvements and surprises to the campaign. They're adding like these little funny in-league mechanics right in the middle of the campaign, which I think is really fun and exciting. I think players are really going to interact with those and not just like race through the campaign. I feel like most players, when they play through the campaign, they take their time and they don't try to speed run it, and I feel like most of the time it should take you like 3 or 4 days to complete the campaign. And if you're doing it in under like 2 days, then you're honestly just like losing out on how much fun you could be having messing around with these small surprises. These small surprises, honestly, are like one of the best additions that they added, and I think it's like gonna be super fun to play with. I'm also extremely excited at the fact that Verici has been changed so that now his safe house reward is a stash of harvest scarabs. I feel like getting white sockets in softcore trade was kind of like cheating, and you need to feel like you have to work for those white sockets and put a lot of effort into those. So the only way to get 6 white sockets on a body armor now is to go for an omen of blanching, which you now have to farm through ritual, and then take that omen of blanching, and then afterwards use sacred life force and red juice in the harvest bench to roll 1 and 6s over and over again to try and hit your last 3 white sockets. I think it's really important that that's in the game. Verici was a little too easy. I feel like even when he barely gave 6 socket white anyways, I think Verici was way too easy. And the same thing goes for 30%ing armor and weapons using Hillock. I feel like Hillock was, again, just too easy to 30% gear. I feel like forcing players to have to use perfect fossils and having to have them remember the fact that they have to use them before crafting on an item is really important. It's going to add more weight to the decision of actually 30%ing an item, right? So that's really important to me. I feel like that extra like 5 to 10 armor that you get is actually a huge impact on a piece of gear. So I'm glad that they have made these changes. I'm also really excited for the change that they did to Soul Eater. I think that this is technically a buff, even though most of the time you're not going to be able to carry out 45 souls into a boss fight, and therefore like magic find characters are going to really struggle with their map boss at the very end of their map, or bossing in general is, say like you're running like a breach stone or something. I think it's important that Soul Eater has been changed so that it makes Headhunter worse for bossing and kind of phases out that style of like Magic Find. I think like honestly Magic Find isn't good anyways, so it's important that they removed like the infinite scaling and the infinite power of Soul Eater and how good it actually was before. I think the changes that they've made are technically a buff, at least for dopamine. Am I right? So um, it's really good that they made this change. I think Headhunter is going to honestly probably go up in price for this reason. And I think people are really going to really enjoy not having Soul Eater up as often and for as long, especially when you're doing things like spending 5 minutes running around chasing an abyss before it pops open. Losing all those souls right before an abyss fight is going to feel really impactful. And I think that's exciting and a difficulty switch up for the game. So it'll make magic finding a lot harder. And I think for a build that was already struggling really badly to stay alive in maps, like even as low as just a regular tier 16 map, I think it's important that magic find gets even worse, and to a point where it can barely sustain white maps. I think that's where magic find really should be, honestly. I also really like the fact that the Soul Eater buff says that it's part of the player balance, and so that means that it might not be also impacting enemies. So enemies might still get the old Soul Eater buff that was really powerful, and we just don't have access to it anymore. I think that's really important, honestly, because I don't think monsters are strong enough in this game. I think the monsters need to get stronger. Honestly, I still feel like GGG could give like a global buff of like 40% more health to all enemies just at a flat value, and the game would still feel too easy. So I'm looking forward to hopefully GGG buffing all enemies across the board going forward. But barring the fact that they've already given us so much, I feel like that's like I'd be asking for too much. So with due time, I think they'll figure it out. I think it's okay where it is at the current moment, but I do think that enemies could be harder. I think enemies are honestly a little too easy, especially like the Roas in the mud flats right at the start of the game. I think those are too too easy. I should be like at least dying once every time, even if I have like 10,000 hours in the game. I think it's important that I'm dying every single time I walk in there at least once. Now, there's too many gem changes that have happened in this patch to go over all of them, but I just want to target some of the ones that I'm most excited about and the ones that I think are going to have the best improvement to the game. So one of them is Frostblink of Wintry Blast and how it can no longer be triggered because it'll add to the cooldown. So basically, you're no longer able to cast this with cast on crit. I'm really excited for that because I think Frostblink of Wintry Blast being used as a cast on crit skill was honestly too strong. It was too fast, and if people didn't know what they were getting into, they would feel sick, you know, playing it, right? Motion sickness and whatnot. So I think it's important that like they removed it entirely from the game so that I have no capability of doing it anymore. And that way I really feel like that aspect of like accidentally falling into the fact that this could cause motion sickness is like no longer a problem, right? So I think it's really important that they completely removed the fact that you can trigger this skill off of cast on crit. Another skill gem change that I'm really excited for is the fact that Archmage support can no longer support brand skills, or orb skills for that matter. I think it's important that they removed one of the best supports for brands. It wasn't feeling fair. It was making brands too strong. And I think that paired with the fact that they removed about 50 to 70% of the damage from from Storm brand and from Penance brand is going to make brands fall back in line with the rest of the skills. So I'm really excited for those changes as well. Something I'm not a big fan of is the fact that they nerfed Tornado Shot and Lightning Arrow. I think those skills were fine. I think there's a reason everyone played those skills, and I don't think they should have touched those skills, but it's okay. GGG, I forgive you because of all the other great changes that you've provided for me. And one of the last things that I wanted to go over was the fact that they removed increased move speed from Ralakash's Impatience. I do agree. I think that the boots were way too good before, and the movement speed made them feel too comfortable. I think removing the movement speed definitely will make players still want to use them because I honestly enjoy a slower mapping experience. So I think it's important that they remove the move speed because I think people are still going to use these boots and definitely not just like forget about them completely. And especially because this means I'm always going to be at maximum frenzy charges. And if I'm at maximum frenzy charges with Ralakash's Impatience, I might as well be moving a million miles an hour anyways. So it's not like that movement speed really made a difference, to be honest. But yeah, I just wanted to go over all the awesome changes that they made in this league and why I'm really, in particular, really excited to get started and hashtag log into this game. Thank you so much, GGG, for this patch. I really appreciate it. I think everyone in the community is really excited for this patch. And guys, I'll probably be playing Lightning Arrow to League start, and then I'll transition into Tornado Shot. It's this really like weird strategy that I'm thinking about doing. I know, but like I think it'll be really good for farming, especially farming essences now that they've been nerfed, so that it's a worse farming strategy. I think that'll make me feel the weight more and help me understand the game better. And so for those reasons, I'm going to be playing Lightning Arrow and transitioning into Tornado Shot. So I'm sorry if you wanted something more meta. I was trying to go for something a little niche and different this time around. But hopefully you guys are okay with that. And I will see you when the league starts in a couple of days. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. All right. See you later.